Today on The Future of Everything, the future of AI in medicine. Now, we're still taping from Zoom, and so I apologize in advance for any technical errors, but we're very excited to be here today. And let's talk about AI in medicine. So medicine is complicated. It's expensive, and it requires clinicians to analyze multiple types of data, imaging data, the history from the patient, the lab values, in order to make a diagnosis, plan and execute a treatment, and follow the patient along over time. These are complex systems and tasks. The data isn't perfect, and sometimes doctors, nurses, and other clinicians make mistakes. Now, AI, and machine learning in particular, is very good at looking at lots of data and finding patterns. And so naturally, there's an interest in seeing whether AI might be able to improve healthcare. There have already been papers published showing that AI systems in the area of imaging can be very successful. So they can look at moles on your skin and evaluate whether it might be melanoma. They can look at x-rays and maybe find a spot on your lung that the radiologist may have missed. And they can look at slices of tissues and say, oh, some of those cells look unusual, might be a sign of disease. Those are the image-based applications. But there are many other applications of AI that could also improve healthcare. Dr. Jonathan Chen is a professor of medicine and biomedical informatics at Stanford University, and his work focuses on computational algorithms that can assist in clinical medicine. Jonathan, in addition to the great promise of these image-oriented AI applications, what do you see as the greatest areas of opportunity for AI going forward in medicine? And welcome.
Got it. Thanks, Russ. Great discussion. A really big, complex topic, but also I think a lot of rich areas to develop and explore there. I kind of come at it from the perspective, I'm also a practicing physician, and I like to think back, before I was a practicing physician, I was a software developer. I got my PhD in computer science, and I have this view of medicine and just the world being this very logical, deductive process, like thinking like an engineer, right? If you have an ache in your belly, you go to the doctor, they give you the diagnosis, they give you the correct treatment, and you get better, right? Because why wouldn't they do that, right?
It's all an algorithm.
Right, it's just, why wouldn't this be a very natural, linear, repeatable process? And then I went through medical training and I was like, oh my God, it's not like that at all. It's not like that at all. And it's not because anyone's lazy, it's not because anyone's dumb, it's because it is complicated. In fact, it is complex. Right, there is so much undesirable variability in the way we practice because so much uncertainty in managing that. And that's where part of the reason I went through the medical training, even though the reality is I'm really more of a computer geek, it's because to really contribute to a problem, you got to understand it well and at least see what's happening on the front lines. And in doing so, that inspired me to ask a lot of questions where I feel like, man, as a doctor, I wish a tool existed that let me help me treat my patients here. And if nobody else will build it, well, you know what? I have the training that I could develop the prototype then if it doesn't exist, and trying to bring those together.
So that's
managing
really
uncertainty.
That's great. So where did you decide to focus your attention initially?
Got a few ways. One particular one, which drive a main thread of work, was when I was an intern in medicine, taking care of a complex patient. I think they came with pancytopenia. All their blood cell lines were very low. I have no idea what I'm doing. They get referred from an outside hospital. The document says referral for higher level of care, right? And I'm thinking, who's that? Is that me? Am I the higher level of care? I'm like 2 months out of medical school, right? What do I know here?
Oh my goodness, I am the higher level of
Wait a minute, wait. Oh, wait, no, that's supposed to be me. But of course, I consult an expert. Here we are at academic medical center. I phone a friend. Call an expert hematologist. Hey, what would you do? He says, oh, maybe I'll do a bone marrow biopsy, but make sure you check their parvovirus, their HIV, their EBV, their B12. And I'm frantically writing all this down. I'm like, oh my gosh, he clearly has essentially this algorithm in his head about what to do. And I'm frantically writing this down. I'm like, that's kind of silly. Why isn't this just written down somewhere? Why isn't this reusable? It's just kind of lost in the ether through these individual conversations. And that got me thinking, the next time I'm stuck or next time I'm unsure how to deal with a complex patient, I wish I could just sneak a peek at this guy's charts, see how he took care of patients before, because I bet I can learn from that. But privacy laws appropriately got to be careful about that. And then I got to think, why would you look at one doctor's chart, especially when there is so much variability in the way we practice, undesirable variability? Mm-hmm. I bet we could learn even more by looking at 1,000 doctors' charts. Can we empower individuals with the collective experience of the many? Exactly, because I haven't accumulated 40 years of medical experience yet. In fact, nobody will. and it becomes impractical to do so. And they got me thinking further, wait a minute, that thing I just described, I mean, that's basically the way computational recommender algorithms work, right? It's taking the collective experience of the many and enabling individuals to learn from that in a very systematic way.
Tell me about, you said collective recommender algorithms. So unpack that a little bit for those of us who might not do this all the time.
Sure. I mean, so the usual everyday experience is when you go buy a book on Amazon, it says, oh, you like this book? You might like this one too. And there's some very funny articles that comment how it's strange how sometimes these product recommender, YouTube video recommender algorithms sometimes seems to know you more than your own spouse sometimes. It really gives you like the perfect, oh, yeah, I really did like that. I wouldn't have even thought about it.
Honey, I have no idea why it recommended that book.
Yes, but you know what? It turns out it's great. And some of the really innovations in computer science in the past 10 years have been this space of crowdsourcing and collaborative filtering. But how does it do that? Is it like, it's because they dissected? I thought what it was Amazon read all the books in the world basically, and they annotated, oh, if you like, this author, I bet you'll like this one.
This is a romantic comedy. He likes romantic comedies with a happy ending.
Exactly.
But that's not how it works, I take it?
For a large part, that's actually not how it works. That's how I assumed it worked. And someone did this, detailed curation. What they did is they just looked at people's behavior. Well, the last time somebody bought this, the last 1,000 people did, this is what they also did. So actually, they don't really understand why that is, but that human phenomena is creating something. And I'll relate that back to medicine. A lot of the potential for AI in medicine is really driven by the data, right? The data is the fuel, and that's actually a huge bottleneck, is labeled training data. Someone telling you, yes, this is a picture of a tumor. Yes, this is a patient who has diabetes. That's so laborious and expensive to do that in a good way. But rather than dreaming about what you could do with well-labeled data, what about the masses of unlabeled data? Because as doctors, I realize that's what we are. We are an army of manual annotators. That's what we do every day. When I treat you, I'm giving you my best guess. I think this is the right medication. I think this is the right test. And normally that experiential expertise is just thrown away. No one ever learns from that unless we could do it in a systematic way today, which is becoming possible.
Gotcha. So your idea is to take these ideas from Amazon and Netflix about collaborative filtering and saying, okay, I have this patient in front of me. I have a rough idea of what's wrong. When similar patients have been worked up by a physician, and especially perhaps physicians who know a lot more than me because they're specialists, what are the tests they ordered? Is that the question? And what is the kind of implicit algorithm that they may have applied, but they may never have written down in such a way, but when you watch them do it, it becomes clear. Does this also give you a sense of where there's areas of disagreement in the field?
Definitely so. I mean, what's interesting as you observe this phenomena is that there is a lot of variability. This is kind of a known phenomena in medicine that, people get maybe 50% of the recommended healthcare they're supposed to get. Some doctors will do 6 times more care in the last 6 months of life than others. And it's just clearly we can't all be right. So that actually is identifying that variability is important to recognize where we're probably not doing things as effectively as we can. So these kind of methods help you reveal that so you can identify, maybe we should do something. And also it gives you kind of this normative assessment of identifying those patterns that, for one, it's often very hard for an expert to explain even how they're doing something. They're often, no discredit, actually human expertise is extremely powerful and actually quite effective. The challenge with it is that it is very difficult to reproduce, which then my argument is that means it's essentially impossible to deliver human expertise, the scarcest healthcare resource, at scale without some kind of support system, which is what I'm trying to capture here.
This is The Future of Everything. I'm Russ Altman. I'm speaking with Jonathan Chen about how AI algorithms might be able to help in a variety of medical settings. So you got me. I'm on board with this. Are the systems being built? What are the challenges of actually understanding how to build these systems? And how open are the doctors to this help that you're offering?
Great, deep questions. I mean, as you would well know, most of these ideas we're talking about now, they're really not new, right? People talking about this probably in the 1980s for sure, and probably even before that, the idea of using computers and information systems to help. And of course, medicine, healthcare is the one place where counting actually counts, right? Everyone wants this to be the application domain. It just turns out it's really, really hard to do so. And we can make this, how come we can beat professional Go players? Because self-driving cars. Why haven't we solved medicine yet? I mean, come on, let's get to it already, right? I think the major distinction, at least in those cases, is you can simulate playing a video game, and there's amazing algorithms out that can just learn how to play Atari games. You just unleash it and it can figure it out. Why can't we do that in medicine? It's because you can't simulate medicine and expect to know what the outcomes are. If you could, automated reinforcement learning algorithms are amazing. I just don't see how that's feasible for most medical applications. It's just too much complexity there. So I guess a key ingredient, which is starting to make it possible, that ingredient is the data. Clearly, computational powered algorithms are important, but without the data, there's really nothing you can do with that to some degree. So now, for better or worse, as clunky as it is, at least the electronic medical record exists now. It's very clunky, but at least there is this capture. It wasn't even possible to imagine. Well, it was possible to imagine. It wasn't possible to even prototype some of the things we're talking about even 10, 15 years ago.
Right.
But as you allude to, still a long road to translate into things that actually work in workflows that are usable by clinicians, acceptable by patients. And what I try to draw the analogy is we can now build a lot of the really cool software, but software doesn't do anything without the hardware. And the hardware, it's people, basically, right? You need good decision-making algorithms and thinking processes, but someone has to actually put the IV in the patient. Someone has to actually counsel and examine them. And we should really recognize that if you don't combine those two, the software really is not going to do anything without that understanding of how it ties in.
So you made reference that, at first you looked at this one expert and then you said, well, wait a minute, maybe I want to get the opinion of multiple experts. And that raises the question, can you build these systems based on the data in your hospital, your home hospital where you work? Is that enough data? Or do you need to go beyond that hospital and mix data from different hospitals, either regionally or at the state level or federal? How much data do you need so that you're comfortable that it's being informed in a reasonable way by enough data so that your statistics are good and that you're making good recommendations to the physicians?
A lot of depth there too, because also what does it even mean to have a good recommendation? Actually, it's really hard to define. What is good medical decision? Actually, I'm not even sure we can agree on that. There are principles we can aim for, so that's good to break down. The general rule of thumb, you would think, is just more data, more better. I actually think that's a little bit of a trap, right? Just think, oh, my one hospital data is pretty good. What if I had the whole state? What if I had the whole nation? What if I had the whole world? You can multiply by 100, 1,000-fold. But in the data dimensionality we're talking about, it's like the complexity grows like 2 to the 10th power or 2 to the 1,000th power. It's not 1,000 times more. It's 100,000 times, 1,000,000 times more complicated. So actually doubling your data set size, that probably doesn't help that much. And you have to be kind of clever in the ways of what's credible to answer and what you can't. So more data, better in general, although actually some studies we've done specifically show that just more isn't actually better. Sometimes can be distracting, especially if more is history. I've got 20 years of historical data from the hospital. Wow, millions of patients. But how we practice medicine 5, 10 years ago, it's not even clear that's relevant anymore. So it's an important breakdown to decide. I like to do this contrast in my grad school. I studied chemistry. So I basically built classical rules-based expert systems. If you see a nitrogen and oxygen, this is how they'll interact. And I spent 2 years of my life writing down all these rules. But you know what? Once I wrote those rules, I'm done. Chemistry is chemistry. That's
chemistry
not
hasn't changed much, right?
And that rule was true 10 years ago, and 100 years ago, it'll still be true. The rules of how to practice good medicine, it changes basically every few years. Guidelines have to be updated continuously as we learn new technology, learn more environmental factors and other combinations.
What about variation in practice? So another issue from going from even the hospital across the street, and there are literally hospitals across the street from the hospital that you work at, they might have a different culture. They're experts, even if achieving relatively similar outcomes for their patients, may do it in a very different way. And when you average those together, it might lead to nonsense. So has that problem been approached? What do we do about local variation in care?
It's a tricky thing. I think one argument could be rather than ignoring, take advantage of your local variation, right? Do you try to have the master model that represents, everybody and kind of does equally bad for everybody? Or should you do something that is tailored? If your local culture and practices is optimized in a certain way, learn that and then propagate that and use that in a useful way. Although again, this can also expose the unexpected variations even within, let alone across sites, that require some more introspection. Like I think the bottom up, the data-driven approach can reveal a lot more and synthesize things that'd be very hard to do in a manual way. But having some top-down attention to understand what we're doing, if you don't do that, as you pointed out, it's very easy to learn nonsense that just doesn't make sense when you understand common sense, the thing that is hardest to train a computer to understand.
Yeah, so I'm struck because in the last couple of minutes we've talked about over time it changes. It changes when you cross the street. You still need a lot of data, so I can get the feeling how this is not going to be very easy to do. And yet I know that you're prototyping systems. In the prototype systems that you've built, have you had the courage yet to show this to a colleague who's an actual practicing physician and ask them, is this something that you would find useful? How open are our colleagues in medicine to these kinds of tools?
It's interesting. There's definitely variation there as well. Some who are like, whoa, whoa. It's also the packaging, right? The reality is most of my research, I almost never use the word AI because I think it's a loaded marketing buzzword at this point. And people think, oh, Jonathan, he's got an AI tool that's going to take over your job. And suddenly like the arms are crossed and you're skeptical. I'm like, whoa. That's never what I said. But I get where that sentiment is coming from. So in fact, we've already done this in many cases, built some prototypes of this recommender I'm describing, and it's a simulated user interface. So I had real doctors. We had 43 real doctors sit down at a computer, pretend you're taking care of a patient who's having a heart attack or a stomach bleed or something like this. And then the computer simulates that happening, and then just punch in the orders, put in the medications, the tests you would do. But as you're doing it, the system will make suggestions, which you're welcome to ignore. There's nothing, by design, they were never obligated to interact with it, because also there's a very well-known phenomenon of alert fatigue. If every time you're trying to, you know what you want to do, and then every time the computer stops you, hey, wait, were you sure? I think wait, were you sure? How about this? That's really annoying, very disruptive to the cognitive workflow. So by design, it does not do that. It's like a little sidebar, like Amazon recommendation. By the way, if you're interested, I think you might like this stuff.
So just out of curiosity, where do you actually put it on the screen? I'm just interested in this. I know this is a super detail, but like they're entering their orders. Is it on the upper right? Is it on the upper left? Is it a scroll at the bottom? Where did you put this recommendation so that you give them a chance of seeing it, but you also give them a chance to ignore it?
Yes. That definitely is a design decision. I've gone through a couple iterations. I think that's also it's not data analytic work. It's like user interface, user experience design work. It's building good software is not just the algorithm. It's like how you present it in an active way. So I've gone through a few iterations. Right now it's in the bottom right corner, and it's where if you didn't have the system, how would a doctor have to work normally? They have to manually search. Find me the medication. It's like Ceph something. They just type in Ceph into a search field, and then Google's search results would pop up somewhere.
Yep.
So instead of where the normal search results would be, I auto-populate that by default with some stuff you might want.
So it's the area that they might go to when they were looking for some help or looking for some search. That's good. So it makes sense that you would put it in that, like, I'm not so sure what to do area of the screen.
Yeah. And then by default, that area would be blank, right? Because you haven't searched for anything yet. But, rather than being blanked, how about let me look at what kind of behavior, what kind of choice you're already making, and can the system automatically infer what you're doing and thus anticipate what you want without even having to ask for it? It's certainly at least this aspiration I'm going for. Because otherwise, a lot of clinical decision support type systems, the classical model, it's very interruptive. It's like, well, since you got to answer this question for me before I can give you a suggestion. It's like, do I not have enough data entry to do? If you open up this other web page, can you fill out this form and I might give you some suggestions? Like, oh my gosh, like it's just more interruptions in the flow, whether I'm trying to envision this integrated flow, which conceptually is possible, is clearly doable in other industries, but a catch with healthcare lagging behind other industries by a decade in terms of our infrastructure.
So I have to ask, the headline of this conversation was, I think you said 43 physicians. So there you go. These are 43, and I'm guessing that they're not all your best friends, and most of them are probably more than willing to give you feedback. What are they saying about the experience, and was it positive? Does it give a way forward?
I think so, Carrie, with it, realizing it's a simulated setting, right? But I think we need to get that so that we can get the buy-in to go to a live setting, right? Because you said the reality is this is a little radical, right? This whole approach I'm describing. And you can do incremental efforts, and we do those too. But if you want a radical approach, the world is not ready for it. You got to start with these steps. But so overall, the feedback's very positive. 95% of them say, this seems pretty cool. I can see how this could help my work. Some nuanced comments like, I think it's better for it's strange. Some people say, I think this is better for very complicated cases, versus other people say, I think this is very better for simple cases. But nonetheless, most people would think that there is utility in having a resource like this available in the workflow. One company's like, I wish, it's interesting dueling comments. I wish a tool like this already existed in practice now so I could use it And it could be this great safety net. It's not like I'm dumb. I know what I'm doing. But when I've got 20 patients to keep track of, admitting 10 patients at a time, it's just very easy to miss the details that matter, right? Yep. The interesting, ironic counter comment, I had one doctor going through it. It's like, wow, this tool is so good. I'm going to follow it. And then it turns out at the end of the case, he missed at least 1 or 2 important decisions. He said, oh, shoot. It's because the algorithm is so good. I just stopped thinking. I just did what I thought I didn't even think anymore. It was just doing such a great job. I didn't catch that it missed 1 or 2 important things.
He let his Tesla go without supervision.
Because it was right 99% of the time. Oh, great, autopilot. I'm going to take a nap now. Like that's dangerous too. What can happen, right?
This is the future of everything. I'm Russ Altman. More with Jonathan Chen about AI and medicine and the future next on Sirius XM. Welcome back to the future of everything. I'm Russ Altman. I'm speaking with Jonathan Chen about AI, machine learning, and really computational algorithms that can help doctors do their job better. And in the last section, we talked about a study where you had 43 physicians, really interesting findings with like a willingness to use the tool, but actually, as you described, quite polar uses of it and quite polar reactions to it. So clearly still a work in progress. But I wanted to go to an issue that's been in the news and that people are worried about, which is, it falls under the category of bias, that we know that there are inequalities in access to healthcare, inequalities in use of healthcare, and we're worried that these could become entrenched and made worse with the use of algorithms that might not be sensitive to the need to take care of different groups fairly. So is this an issue, I guess is the first question, and what can you do? What are the ways to make sure that you're not perpetuating inequality in the healthcare system?
You got it. I mean, fantastic direction, and actually a really tough challenge. The reality is I'm actually worried. I'm actually more worried than I am confident that this is going to be managed.
Yeah, so tell me about your worries, because that's useful to hear from an expert as well.
Yeah. So we actually wrote, there was a whole National Academy report on potential AI medicine, and actually I led the chapter on potential unintended consequences, and this is one of the key ones. And the way I try to summarize it, that AI or just automation technology, it tends to have an amplifying effect. And that means it makes you better at doing whatever you are already doing. So is that amplification or is that exacerbation? So if it helps you do better at making medical diagnoses, like, great, let's use that. But if one of the things I do, perhaps even subconsciously, is perpetuate, say, racial bias, it's going to be making me better at doing that too, for example. There was a very high-profile science paper maybe a year ago now, Ziad Obermeyer, where an insurance company with, I think, all good intentions says, oh, if people who use a lot of healthcare resources, we're going to deploy a special team to help them out because they clearly need some help.
Because that might reduce our costs and get them better care.
You got it. And the finding in the study is like, oh, for people who are equally sick, it was more likely to offer more help to white people than black people, basically, just based on their patterns of prior. White people tend to use more healthcare than black people did, more for kind of structural reasons rather than from a clinical reason. And so if you just deployed the system blindly, it would just do more of that, right? And it's tricky, right? Because I would definitely, I think fairly say, I don't think any analyst or algorithm writer of this company was trying to make something discriminatory. In fact, I bet what I think they think. They thought, oh, I want to be agnostic. I don't want to have any bias, so I'm going to ignore race. I'm going to ignore ethnicity. I'm going to ignore gender and sex.
So that might not have even been a variable that the computer knew.
That's what I suspect would be how the peer engineer would think that way, basically. Except that if you do that, that's actually how it's more likely you can actually exacerbate existing structural issues. And then you can't even detect it, let alone, account for and adjust for it. So I'm definitely concerned about that. In the broader context, there's also, this word about, I don't know, is a computer going to take my job? I basically think no. I mean, it's a weird theme in my life. That actually kind of has been my theme is in the past 20 years. I want to make a computer do my homework for me is basically what I want to do.
Right.
So if I could make a computer replace my job, I would do that, but I'm not doing that. I actually don't even think it's possible. But certain tasks within our jobs, I think, can be. And overall, there's a phenomena of there's net productivity increases through technology is on average good for everybody, right? The fact that we can all eat well because a small percentage of the population can produce the food, that's a great thing. However, these technological advances, they increase the benefit for everybody, but it almost always exacerbates existing inequities, right? It concentrates power and wealth into the few who already have it. And so you might think, well, hey, for every scheduler's job or mundane technical job that gets replaced, or a driver or retail clerk job that gets replaced, yeah, but there's like 5 more software development analyst jobs that gets created. So on the net, it's actually better. It's actually a job creating tool. However, the kind of people who got pressured out of their position before are probably not in the best position to gain from the new digital divide.
Would you say that the medical AI field is aware of these bias issues? Because it sounds like this needs to be front and center on everybody's minds. Yeah, as you pointed out, there's already been a case of a high-profile insurer with best intentions, actually not leading to good outcomes. Do you think that this now was a clarion call, and that people kind of get that this is an issue that needs to be attended to? And is the technical knowledge in place to identify and remove this bias, or is that an open research question still?
I would say definitely very open research question. And, I wrote a piece a couple of years ago about how we're at the peak of the inflated expectations. I think we're past that. People are starting to have a more maturing understanding. I don't think we've solved this at all. I certainly know the NIH cares very much about, let alone AI technology. When you run a randomized control trial, if you only have middle-aged white males in the trials, that's good to do. It's important to do, but it's just really hard to know how that applies to everybody else. So they're very cognizant of the issue. Having solved it, I'm not sure that's happened yet. And I think also a trap, though, from the technical perspective is people think there's a technical solution to this. I actually don't think there is. That's my somewhat opinion here. This really is one we need more of a partnership with people like social scientists, political scientists, ethicists who have a perspective. And it's not you got to write the right math formula to correct this. I think that's actually misguided to believe it's that simple. But that's, at least having an awareness of the issue is the first step to being able to do something about it.
Yeah, that really does make sense. So let me go to another easy question, which is
no problem. We'll solve it by the end.
The regulation of AI and medical devices. So, we think about the Food and Drug Administration, the FDA. They not only regulate medications, they also regulate medical devices. I don't even know if the kind of algorithms you're describing are medical devices, but let's just say that the FDA decides that they are. What are the opportunities and challenges in figuring out, is this a safe thing that is going to help patients versus we're about to do a lot of damage? Has the community thought about that? Where are we in our understanding of the regulatory challenges for AI-based decision support and devices?
Yeah, this is tough. It's definitely also open, unresolved issue. Rob Califf at a recent conference we had on human and
he's
AI.
The former FDA commissioner.
You got it. A couple years back, having been the former FDA commissioner, he had a great comment and says, I'm actually not sure what the right regulatory model for these systems are, but I can tell you it's not what we have right now. That is what I can tell you. It became a very confusing mix. The simplest way to say, well, software is a medical device, and as long as there's a human in the loop, provide all the support to a human decision maker as you want. At the end of the day, the liability is on the human for agreeing or accepting anything. Which is interesting because remember that example I told you where the doctor was like, wow, this system is so good. I don't even have to worry about it. It just tells me what to do. It's so good, right? And it worked 99% of the time, but oh shoot, that 1% of the time it missed. Now who's responsible for that?
So it's not just a human in the loop, it's an alert human paying attention.
Yes, absolutely. The current model would say that technically the human's on the hook for that because they were supposed to be paying attention and catch potential errors. Having said that, I think part of the whole motivation for technology and information system is we are well past the point where the complexity of modern medicine can be managed by a single expert mind. It's ridiculous to think that any one person can keep track of it all. So already, I'll put 2 analogies to make a contrast. If I want to know what to do with a medical patient, I'm not sure what to do. I would read a textbook, right? And I would do what the textbook tells me to do. Is there regulation for that textbook to make sure that it had perfect information? It clearly is influencing my decisions and driving medical care. But if it turns out to be a little bit wrong, can somebody sue the textbook owner? I don't think so.
I believe the answer is no. FDA does not consider textbooks to be something that they regulate.
Right, exactly. Or just information, knowledge sources, right? Could you regulate a Google search? I don't know about that. I'm not sure you should either. On the flip side, there certainly is precedent if it's a fully automated closed loop system. They say, okay, that's a full autonomous device and that has to be regulated. If you're just going to automate decision making or maybe automating titrating a medication protocol, that needs to be proven to work, a glucose monitor or something like this. In the middle, I think there's appropriate contrast between how high stakes the decisions are and how autonomous are we going to break down. Europe, we can talk about explainability a little bit, another controversial topic. Europe recently passed a legislation that says algorithms that make decisions that affect humans, they have to explain how they work. That's now a requirement. If you notice now, any web browser, every website you go to, they have this thing that, by the way, we use cookies. Are you okay with that? The reason they do that is because we're just in case as a European using it. They have to comply with this law. So that's interesting, and it feels good. And my take from reading about it is it's probably pointless because it's not enforceable. What does it mean to be explainable anyway? A doctor can explain what they're doing, but how do you know they're not making up nonsense? Because the reality is, I think very often it's not nonsense, but it's just we start to say, I don't know, cytokines. That's why. I mean, we just kind of make up words which make some sort of
There's a fine line
sense
between a mechanistic explanation that really yields full understanding versus a just so story that gets the person requesting the explanation to stop asking any more questions.
Yes.
And that's a trade-off that is very real and which has not been specified in those regulations. Well, I must say, this has been fantastic. Thank you for listening to The Future of Everything. I'm Russ Altman. If you missed any of this episode, listen anytime on demand with the SiriusXM app.